topic. So we're running just a wee bit behind here. But I do see we've got your worship online. Neil, thank you for joining us today. And we have Susan Freeman Green and Simon Randall in the chambers from LGNZ. And so in the chambers, we've got Councillor Hodge, Mahuta, Smith, Dunbar, Smith, Strange, Councillor Cookson, who will be here in just a moment, I'm sure, Councillor Marr, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Clarkson online. We've got Councillor Nicol and Councillor Kneebone still online. Yes.
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
here.
Right. We did have apologies from Councillor Graff, but other than that, you've got us all, I believe. I haven't missed anybody, right? Sweet. Thank you very much for joining us today. So shall I just turn straight over to you? Now, just I suppose a bit of background, this workshop came out of a discussion that came before council, just in relation to our membership with LGNZ. So we thought that the best avenue for councillors to ask whatever questions they feel need to be answered or explore their and augment their understanding of the value of the LGNZ membership to Waikato Regional Council. Thought a workshop was the appropriate place to do that. Just an FYI, we do film all of our workshops and they will be online. So this is all open to the public. So over to you, Susan. I just got to get you to get
Right,
it red.
Ken.
There we go.
Yeah.
Red light.
Kia ora koutou. It's fabulous to be here. I am going to pass straight to Neil, Mayor Neil, who is on our National Council, and he's going to get the ball rolling. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. Yep, good day, Neil. Neil, I'll be your mayor today. Pretty unusual to have one of those leading a discussion in a regional council chamber, so I won't say anything about unitaries. And look, thanks for the opportunity. I understand that you know, the nature of the discussion is your team determining what you want to do with regard to membership of LGNZ. Look, from my perspective, I think it's a no-brainer that there's significant value in LGNZ membership. I'll just take a step back, just a little bit about me. Before I had my epiphany and came to public office, I used to work for a Lions company, I think the one up your way as well, Network. So I used to work for Powerco, and they're a member of an organisation called Electricity Networks of Aotearoa. There's about 28 Lions companies. And what they understood is if you want to influence policy and shape regulation, the way you do it is working together and create basically a specialist team with, you know, that's developed the capability and you know, works on those relationships with Wellington. So and you know, those are purely commercial organisations, and I remember I used to do quite a lot of work with the ENA, and one of the things, so Powerco was like number 2 behind Vector in terms of second largest Lions company in New Zealand, but we one of the real benefits for all the members of the ENA, but particularly the smaller network companies, was the access to high quality submissions. And so the you know, the process that we would go through, and this is what LGNZ does, they develop submissions, provide them early to member councils, and then the councils can then take that submission, which probably doesn't include localized elements, but then they can modify it themselves. Now, you know, to hire a decent policy analyst and you will be aware of the number of submissions that, I mean, at MPDC, I think we're firing off kind of one every 2 to 3 weeks. yeah, to get a good policy analyst, you're probably talking $120,000 to $140,000, and you'll realise that while your CEs probably won't want to talk about the overhead allocation when you hire a staff member, you can add probably another half in terms of, you've got to create a desk for them in an office with a computer and things. So when you look at the value of your membership purely on the submissions alone, if you're using them, you'll be saving money. So I, for my sins, have been, my peers in the provincial sector chose me as the chair of the provincial sector. And I also, because I've got a bit of an obsession with infrastructure and transport, I work with Pam and others on a transport forum, which is, for me, transport is an area where it's the one area across all councils where there's a high level of cohesion in terms of the thinking, which to me meant we had a strong mandate to push with government. And, through that work, we've had access to key ministers and discussions leading into the development of the last two GPSs, and actually shaped those GPSs, because at one stage there was talk under Minister Michael Wood of slashing transport funding on rural roads to pay for public transport funding in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. And that was in the draft GPS, and we pushed really hard. And Michael Wood he kind of self-terminated in that role due to his issues with not selling his airport shares. He was replaced by David Parker, and we pushed David Parker really, really hard. And subsequently, the modified GPS provided a significant uplift in funding for the maintenance and operations of roading, which was, as I say, to me, a great advocacy win. And then built a great relationship with Simeon Brown prior to him becoming the Minister of Transport. And you will have seen that there was, again, we'd seen an increase in funding for transport. Now, it's not been to everybody's liking. I think there was, some elements in those GPSs that some of our, particularly those operating public transport, have concerns around about the costs of customer contributions to bus fares and things. But ultimately, we grew the pot of funding, and we got them to commit to tackling the pavement crisis that New Zealand has in terms of deteriorating pavement. Just want to also, I think the work that regional councils have done with Te Uru Kahika has shown some real benefits. LGNZ has worked hand in glove with Te Uru Kahika, and I think that example, that the work that was done before the deluge, and I believe actually Basil Chamberlain, who's a great Taranaki local government personality, was involved in going out and doing the work. And one of the reasons that project got funding was that in developing that, it understood the way that government views risk, the way that government likes to absorb information, the way that government likes to inform kind of policy making. And at an individual council level, we just don't have the capacity. Even, New Plymouth District Council was kind of we're a small city, so I think we're about 11th on, in terms of size of councils, but we've got some policy people here, but they're great. We'd need more of them if we didn't have the LGNZ stuff. We take the policy things that Simon and the team produce, and then just tweak them a little bit based on our own on our local views and preferences. I think in terms of there's some discussion around access to government. So, the government has made it clear that they don't want to deal with 78 different territorial authorities. They're quite happy to talk to Auckland, because Wayne Brown represents, a third of New Zealand. But in terms of, doing business with them in a way that's efficient for them, it's very clear. You've had the Prime Minister turn up at LGNZ's conference. He'll be there again this year. In the roles that I have with LGNZ, I've been really fortunate in having access to, Minister Simon Watts, Minister Chris Bishop, Minister Simeon Brown, Under Secretary Simon Court. They will make time for LGNZ members, and we're getting access to ministers, and we're getting access to them before they've made their minds up on policies that are important to us. And I think that's, again, about, the Beltway. I spent years at Powerco working to change the Commerce Act to allow us to invest more in our networks. And, the Beltway runs the way it runs, and it's got its own culture. And if you want to actually get, drive change and influence outcomes, you do need people that are part of that, part of that process, that understand the role between, the bureaucrats and the ministers. I just thought I'd break down a few issues about value, right? So I think my understanding is your membership fee is $85,000. So, I mean, I've come from a commercial background, so I'd just say, the reality is, if you decide to exit, it's going to cost you more, and it's going to isolate you, is my view, and it won't actually deliver long-term value to your community. So, just as an example, standing orders. So the standing orders, to get someone to do that, it's a huge amount of work. I don't know if you've seen the base, the latest version, but that's probably $50,000 worth of work there. It's probably 3 or 4 months for somebody. Similarly, code of conduct, and that doesn't cover things like, I think you've got there's a chairs school for once you've survived, for those of you that survive the next great cull, election, and nominated a chair. There's training for those people. And look, for me, I went to mayors. I got elected. I didn't expect to get elected. I wasn't actually didn't really want to be elected at the time. It was just a bit of a marketing thing to get on the council. But anyway, I got elected, and then my wife was very grumpy with me, and then they bundled me off to mayor's school. And I met this wonderful bloke, Bill Dalton, who kind of became immediately a mentor. He's the mayor of Napier. He was a very successful insurance broker. Between him and Lawrence Yule, they gave me tips that helped me through, and skills and the ability and their phone numbers, and said, hey, if you ever have any problems, we've kind of been there, done that, got the T-shirt. Those networks, they didn't just benefit me as an individual, but they provided a significant benefit to this council and subsequently the community through the tips and support, and just that collective wisdom. You've got a huge amount of material and resources through LGNZ's online platform, including training for your membership. And we've been big in New Plymouth about, I came from an organisation that invested heavily in professional development. They invested hugely in me, and one of my core, I suppose, values as in any team that I'm a part of, I want to invest in my colleagues and myself to lift performance, and that's expensive, right? Those training costs money, but having access to all of that training material, and a lot of it being online, it reduces travel costs, etc., related to training, which often, generally, often training, 30% of the budget would go on travel and accommodation related to actually getting the training. The other thing I was going to mention is that networking has for me, it's one of the most valuable things is, look, I have my areas of interest, and I'm laser focused on those things, which is around kind of benchmarking and infrastructure. I'm not the RMA guy, right? So if when I look at Toby from Hauraki, and he gets all excited about RM, and that's the thing. If I need to talk about resource management, I go and see Toby, or give him a ring. And it's though I only met Toby through this, but I've got him when it comes to disaster recovery and emergency management. I've got that my friends on the East Coast, Rahet, Sandra, Kirsten, and those are the people I talk to about that sort of thing.
Madam Chair, can I just interrupt? I'm sorry to be rude, but the reality is, can we get to the point? I'm actually getting a little bored, and I don't want to be offensive, but I came here to actually be engaged, and this is going on. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, cool. Well, I'm happy to just answer any questions you've got.
Thank you, Mayor Neil, and apologies for that wee outburst. But I do appreciate how you have taken us through your experience on National Council and your experience as a local government professional, and what LGNZ has meant for you from your perspective. I appreciate that. All right, I'll then go back to Susan and Simon. Is there anything you would
Look, I think,
like to take us through?
thank you. I think it's really important that we answer your questions around these areas. And so just in summary, I want to say that we have three functions. We champion, which is the advocacy submission piece that Neil has talked about quite a lot, and we could add more detail and colour to that. We have the support piece, which is not political. It's purely around what elected members need and how we support them, how we support you. And then we have the connect piece, which is the full suite of events. We hear, people talk about the functions of support and connect in the way of going to the gym. The more you use it, the more you get out of it. So we can provide lots of detail between me and Simon. Simon can talk to the interface with Te Uru Kahika, but let's hear from you. Thank you.
All right, councillors. I've got Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Dunbar-Smith. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, my first point I address is to Mayor Neil. You started off by suggesting to us, Neil, that it's a no-brainer, this membership. It delivers significant value. I'm sorry I didn't hear any of the value significant items in your address to us. So the points that you raised regarding access to ministers, personally have no problems getting access to ministers. In fact, in the last 2-week period ending next week, we'll have been in front of 5 ministers of our own initiative, and they're all very engaging and very happy to talk to us. I became upset with Local Government New Zealand at the last meeting held in Wellington, when the President got up and openly abused the Prime Minister in open session. That to me is unacceptable behaviour from any organisation. The Prime Minister was trying to deliver a message to Local Government New Zealand, and for the President to stand up and criticise the Prime Minister openly, I think is disgraceful. So I'm happy to leave Local Government New Zealand behind if that's their attitude. In terms of the cost, $5,000, that just doesn't seem. I was expecting that we would get a presentation of all the costs associated with membership. People travelling here, there and everywhere, everything to do with Local Government New Zealand.
It's in the pack, Councillor.
I
The
haven't seen it.
expenditure is in the pack.
Okay, thank you. But it's not $5,000. I can
No,
assure you.
and that's not what His Worship said.
He said 85.
He said 85.
85,000, thank you. I'm going to have to get my ears fixed. So yeah, look, I understand the training is of value. I have no question regarding that. But the rest of it, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
All right, I did attend that LGNZ conference last year, and I don't know that I would characterize President Sam's address as abusive in any way, shape, or form. But that's my view. All right, I've got Councillor Dunbar Smith.
Yeah. Firstly, I just wanted to find out who has left local government New Zealand. Which councils have left to date?
Councils that have left. So we have 78 all round, and there are 72 members. And one of the councils that has left, I won't name it, is actively having conversations with me about rejoining. But the councils that are not with us at the moment are Kaipara, Auckland, Christchurch, Westland, West Coast Regional Council, and Western Bay of Plenty. And most of those left a year ago. A number of them have said, we want to talk to you again after the election, but one of them is talking to us about joining now. So out of the 78, there is a strong sense of collective will, which is pretty clear because we're getting invoices paid now.
But obviously, two of the largest contributors are Auckland and Christchurch. So yeah.
Yep. We are, and we are keeping the doors open to both of those councils. We're in regular engagement with them. And I think, we all know that it's sometimes, and we say this, more of a political decision than a direct dollar cost return on investment decision. I think you've all got and have been sent the quite comprehensive report on actual value for money, the dollar return on investment. And even, we were at a council not a couple of weeks ago having a similar discussion, and that council decided to stay with us. But the point was made in that workshop, that debate, the point was made that we can't argue with the return on investment dollar-wise, but we just have to think about the politics. So, that's pretty transparent. And the political point is just one of the 3 areas that we talk to. We have a wide, diverse membership. We look for, we talk to our members all the time. We look for the members' support on the positions National Council takes.
Question for Chief Executive. We have quite a large policy group here who do submissions. How much do we use local government New Zealand submissions and rewrite them, and how much do we write our own?
Through Madam Chair, I don't know the exact answer to your question, but we regularly use submissions that LGNZ puts out and the regional sector put out as a base to assist our submissions. There is an efficiency in that.
Thirdly, I wanted to know how much we spend on Te Uru Kahika. As I understood, it was $425,000 a year.
Yes, it's in that vicinity, and that's not on just a membership. That is on actually getting work done through the collective as well.
Right, and so just to clarify, that is a grouping of regional councils, which is separate from Local Government New Zealand's regional sector group.
So Te Uru Kahika is an administrative arrangement of chief executives across the sector. Yeah, it's not just regional councils. It is it's the 11 regional councils and the 5 unitary councils.
Well, regional and unitaries, but yeah, not the districts. Yeah. So as I understood, one of the questions we were looking at is the 425,000 versus the 80,000. There was a debate to look at where our money would be spent.
Can I just clarify, the services that LGNZ provides are different to the services that is provided through Te Uru Kahika. The services that LGNZ provides, I think some of them was provided in the document that was sent out for this meeting, and I think is in the supporting LGNZ information on what they've provided over the past year or so. Te Uru Kahika is a administrative arrangement for how we can do things together It doesn't, for instance, provide standing orders. It doesn't, for instance, provide code of conduct. It doesn't, for instance, provide the training and mentorship for elected members. It doesn't provide the advice to councils of their, for example, code of conduct issues and how to deal with them, and professional advice on how to work together as an elected member collective. It's kind of a completely different function. Te Ure Kahika is more a work function of the work of the regional sector.
Yeah, so it was it was one of the issues that came up when this debate first came, was it wasn't in the documentation we were provided to compare and contrast, that's all. So thank you.
Sorry, Simon, did you want to speak to that?
Just to add, we work really hard to ensure that you get value for money for both your investments in Te Ure Kahika and LGNZ. So I have really active conversations with the leadership of Te Ure Kahika in terms of what they're doing, what we're doing, how it can complement each other. The regional sector group, which Pamela is the new co-deputy chair of, I form that agenda, but I work really closely with the team to ensure that the right things are coming at the right time, and working with RCOs and things to ensure that all fits together. A really good example of where we've been able to play a very complementary role to each other. So the Before the Deluge and Before the Deluge 2.0, that was work led from Te Ure Kahika in terms of developing business cases and thinking. The expertise and the strength that we could bring is the work that we do working with media. So we did a lot of work with Te Ure Kahika to ensure that there was good media attention and those sorts of things. The regular conversations, so we meet quarterly with the Prime Minister, we meet more frequently with Minister Bishop and Minister Watts. We were ensuring that we were taking the key points and messages from that work into those fora, and supporting with those connections and things. And we also, we have some strengths more on the DIA side. So Te Ure Kahika has really strong relationships into MFE. We've got some stronger relationships in DIA, and we were making sure that all of those things were connected. So they're not competing investments. We work really hard, as I say, to ensure that they get more bang for your buck in terms of both of those relative investments.
Nice. Susan, did you want to add anything?
No, that Simon has talked about the very complementary nature of those two investments and the way we work together, which was the point I was going to make.
Councillor Niban.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, morning, Neil, Koto. Just wanted to, not a question, but just offer some views, and that was that just acknowledge the good work you do. I think it's pretty important that we have a body such as LGNZ and Te Ure Kahika, and particularly that all councils are represented. I think bigger councils generally have a responsibility to maintain their membership, to ensure that smaller councils who can't afford to go it on their own have the support of the bigger councils around them. I was going to make a comment about the need to keep up engagement with those councils that have suspended their membership, but I think, Helen, you mentioned that, so just thank you for that work. I think it's pretty important that we keep that engagement and relationship management up with them. As we know, political flavours change every 3 years, and so they always need to know that they're welcome back into the tent again. But that was all. Thank you for your time today. Yeah.
Well, look, thank you. And I'll just address the, I was at the event where the Prime Minister spoke and our President Sam spoke. I didn't see him as either abusing or being disrespectful to the Prime Minister. But look, ultimately the test would be to ask the PM how he felt. And the reality is that they're meeting regularly. They've got a good working relationship. Simon Watts was at our most recent I think all of sector event down in Wellington at the St James, and has talked about the need for us to work together. So I think some people, everybody sees a conversation and interprets it differently, but what I've seen is pragmatically is groups of people working together to deliver outcomes. And I certainly see that, we've had Chris Bishop, Simon Watts, Simon Court, and the PM actively engaging in LGNZ events. And so I certainly think that it's a reflection that there's professional working relationships there.
Thanks for that.
Can I just
Yes.
add to that? Our events, so, 2-3 times a year, we have these all of local government events, and we have a day of us all together and a day of the sectors meeting separately. And they generate a lot. So they generate a lot of ministerial engagement, as Neil has talked about. We have a full spectrum of ministers, from the ones Neil's talked about through to, the Minister of Finance spoke at our pre-conference women's lunch. We have Andrew Hoggard, Minister Hoggard, Minister Macleay. We have Minister Patterson, Minister Ducey. So we have a very wide-ranging attendance at those meetings, which is pretty powerful. But also the other thing that we do before and around those meetings is generate a lot of proactive media on the issues of the day. So we have relationships with journalists. We don't just wait for the stories to happen. We are actively talking to members and the sector groups to say, how do we front foot this issue in the media? Because that's a way to influence. An example of that was around rates rises last year, where we did some research and we generated a lot of media around the reasons that you were having to, across the country, having to raise rates. We are really thoughtful about that all the time. We're talking a lot at the moment about the safety and abuse of elected members, which is pretty relevant in an election year around democracy. But our funding and financing tools, the importance of addressing that is something that we proactively work on, not only with the politicians and the officials, but also in terms of the public conversation around that. And that comes from having a talented team who really put a lot of effort into working out what members want, what they need, and putting that out there.
Oh, just need to get the red light. There you go. Simon?
Sorry, just to add another bit of research that we did at the same time of particular interest to regional councils was the stuff that we've done around unfunded mandates. So we worked with the NZIR to investigate that. I don't need to tell you that revising freshwater management plans, having a new MPSFM every 3 years, all of that adds a massive amount of cost and complexity to your work, and also leads to challenging conversations around rates and investment, and also the way that you play your regulatory role with your community. And so being able to kind of do that primary research that individual councils probably couldn't necessarily choose to invest in, but us as LGNZ doing that and sharing it with all our members enables you to be able to bring some facts to those conversations about those challenges and what that looks like. And that's helping us to have the right conversations with government around the way that implementation and support for instance, changes to the Resource Management Act could look like for councils, because obviously that will put a huge amount of cost onto the sector and therefore your ratepayers. And so being able to bring some facts to that conversation, work in partnership with government to see how we can resolve some of those challenges. That's some of the value that we bring to you.
Right, I've got Councillor Marr, Councillor Mahuta, and Councillor Smith again. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, can you give us a bit of an update on Te Kurawai? Obviously, it lost 123,000 in the previous year, and there's a bit of a rehash going on, my understanding, around it. You'll need the mic.
Thank you. Find it. Look, it was a program that needed some refresh and renewal, and we have reinvented that off the back of member feedback and with members. And we are getting actual, one of the things that was raised was it was just too intensive, too time consuming, too expensive. So we've developed a framework that enables the sort of evidence, the data assessment piece, but with a whole wraparound development support process. And that is getting a lot more take up now, a lot more interest. So we, the early year in any new program is always going to take a bit of investment. And that's what we've seen, but we're starting to see that changing. So that is going to grow and develop, and we're getting a lot of support for it.
So obviously one of the benefits is councils mapping trends, et cetera, as they go on. So the data that we're going to get out of it going forward will be relative to what we've seen in the past.
The data is looked at, yes, that's what we are working towards, so that you can examine trends. We all know that data around councils, and Neil might want to talk about this, is often apples and pears anyway. So trying to get some consistency within our system of measurement when councils are engaged in that is really important. And that's what we've been working on to create those categories and those measures, if you like, so that there will be that consistency going forward. I mean, I don't know if you want to add, Neil, to the broader challenge of local government data, which is...
Well, look, I'd just say in terms of, Te Korowai that's evolved from Council Mark, New Plymouth District Council, I'm the benchmarking geek. So I had to have several robust discussions with my CEO when I first started about council signing up for Council Mark. But we did it, and we went through the process, and look, there was a lot of work involved, but the key from my perspective were just like with the audit reports, right? No one ever likes being audited, but it's the recommendations are where the value is. And those recommendations were extremely helpful for the organisation. So we went through the process again about 2 years ago, and we largely implemented the recommendations from the previous, and then they provided some further recommendations which have helped, particularly around our risk performance of the elected team, and but also honing in on some of the work that we had to do in terms of our iwi relations and things. So I'm supportive of evolving the process to make it less administratively heavy, because we've all got a lot of admin to do. But and look, we've got the government's going to come out with its new data tools, and look, I'm disappointed as a sector that we haven't owned this stuff, and that's why now that's being imposed upon us. We should have got ahead of the 8 ball, but there's not much I can do about. You provide the opportunities for people to participate, and then it's up to them whether they walk through the door or not. But I think that this government is committed to benchmarking. They've started what I'd say is a pretty I think the work that they're doing isn't a sophisticated start, but I suppose it's a start. There's people that don't understand the sector are trying to understand it and measure it at the same time. But I don't think there's anything to stop us from proactively engaging and saying, actually, we're up for being measured. We just, as a sector, we're probably the best place to understand how, because it's not just about dollars, it's about outputs. And so if you measure inputs and outputs and are really clear about those measures, then that allows useful comparison.
Thank you, Neil. And just one more, just concerned around finances for LGNZ going forward, noting a $500,000 plus loss in 2023 and a $250,000 loss in 2024. How are you looking to address that?
We've looked to address it in a number of ways. So we have had we've looked under every rock for efficiencies, and we've done that through staff attrition, through changing where we, where we work, if you like, and multiple other efficiencies. And we have forecast to turn that round within the next 2 years. So we are doing that on the current membership. It's a little volatile if we have members coming and going, but you know, the more members we have, the quicker we'll get back into the black. But we are absolutely committed to rebuilding our reserves, and we have plenty of reserves within the next couple of years.
And I'll just add, you know, we're also looking at opportunities to expand revenue and the experience. So some of you may have been to the infrastructure symposium, which was hosted in Wellington. It's probably quite a while ago now. Yeah, last year, maybe October or so. But you know, one of the things that I suggested to the team is there are a number of infrastructure providers, whether they're contractors or companies that would love to, you know, get in a room to talk about infrastructure at the time. So there's commercial opportunities there. I mean, that was a great event. That was with Chris Bishop as a keynote speaker, and I think that, you know, that there are opportunities to grow revenue as well but it's not just growing revenue. It's growing value, because it's having our people in the room with some of these key organisations that are really interested in working with local government and potentially central government.
Thank you. And just on that, you know, we are actively thinking about revenue streams that are relevant and add value. We have a relationship around the roading efficiency network and group, which is pretty powerful, and a number of other areas that we generate revenue from. We are most reliant on member fees, but we are actively managing our costs.
Councillor Mahuta.
Kia ora tēnā koutou. Thank you for your time today to discuss this with Council. I've got 3 questions. One is LGNZ serves quite a broad church of views, and I guess want to test that we have the appropriate, or how could we get more robust, I guess, the vehicles in which the membership can speak into the space, especially when there's changes in government or huge changes in policy. I accept that as members we have the zone meetings, we have our regional representations. I know I can go through to Maruata, but I'm wondering if members know enough of these tools to use within local government New Zealand, because I think pulling the trigger on membership would be, you know, it's like a sledgehammer at a fly really, but here, aku whakaaro ēnei. That's one. Secondly, conduct, and I've been through one of these last triennium, is something that local government has a remit sit, as we all look in the room and sit across each other and things like that under the LGA. So no doubt there's a remedy if a member would want to censure or take exception with what the President has said in a public forum. And could you please give the pathway for that so we can deal with that matter specifically? And then on the growth of local government New Zealand, and I think an expertise that is often become, I guess, monetised by the big legals or the big accountings, is co-governance, that practice. So there's at least 5 regions where settlements require local government to work with iwi. And we still have to educate the incumbent local governors and the sector each time. So there's no memory bank of all the gains over the years within the sector. It's held within each council. And I just think if you, whatever they call it, working with iwi on these huge resource management issues has to be something that local government kind of champions, because everybody else has a vested interest in commercialising the advice. Kia ora.
Oh, just a red light there.
I'll make a start, thank you. And then Simon and Neil may want to chip in. So in terms of the networks, there are many ways. I mean, for a start, you can just contact any member of our team and we will actually engage with that in that conversation. But we have the Young Elected Members Network, we have Te Marawata, we have the zone meetings, we have the sector meetings, we have the all of local government meetings, and we have we have, we have special groups, and I know we're thinking about how, like the transport group, and I know we're thinking about how we might do that in the policy space going forward. So that's in that space. In terms of the conduct, if someone is concerned about the behaviour of our president or another member of National Council, we have no formal process for that. But again, our doors are open. We want to hear that. And I know that, for example, Sam, National Council, will engage in that discussion to either improve understanding or I would say that President Sam is the first to say, I got that wrong, if he actually thinks he does, but he would engage in a conversation about that. And I know we are listening. We are very much there for our members and their feedback. And as everyone has said, in terms of that conversation between the Prime Minister and Sam in the public forum, there were multiple different perspectives on that. Some of our members said he was far too soft and should have gone much harder back on the Prime Minister. So, there is, it's a very, just to put the other perspective in the room. In terms of what we've learnt as, in terms of the collective memory bank, I think was the word you used, in terms of a number of things that we've learned through the years, including relationships with iwi and how you make those work. We are really clear that using Arcona, which I think as a platform we've developed over the last 2 or 3 years, and now has about $1 million worth of assets in it, to the extent that if you went and hired a consultant to develop it, that's what it would cost them. And that's free access for everyone. And we are constantly looking for ways to add new programs into that, to think about case studies, how we learn, how we share, and how we keep that collective knowledge. And that's one of the key parts of that platform that we think is a huge and evolving and growing value, and that's a good place for that. Thank you. Simon, Neil, did either of you have anything you want to add to that?
Look, just in terms of, look, there are resets at every election, and in terms of, treaty relationships and the involvement in education, I suppose, of new members and things, it is, look, the reformation of a team after an election is a huge piece of work, and it's up to it's management working in partnership with the elected teams to come up with basically an induction process that works for them. But as I say, I found having access to peers, so that from a governance or elected member perspective, we were able to shape the induction far more. When I first got there, it was pretty much a prescription from management, whereas now it's a partnership, and that involves our members of Te Maruata having an active involvement in shaping the induction, with a view that it's actually, we've got obligations, and by involving those people in developing the training and the program, it's helped the whole organisation. And I've got a couple of my colleagues who, would be fair to say, they'd be quite comfortable with me sharing that they lean pretty reasonably hard to the right, but they went out to a marae visit. Both of them said they'd never been on a marae. They were both actually quite nervous about it, and at the end of the process they felt a lot better. They had a good time, they learned a lot. So I think the LGNZ's got, by creating that network within Te Maruata, and also the Mayor's School, and now I see there's a Chair's School for regional councils, they're hopefully capturing some of this institutional knowledge to pass it on to help teams lift their performance.
Simon.
Kia ora, and tēnā koe, Councillor. Just in terms of the wider memory banks piece, and we're a small but perfectly formed team in policy, so there aren't necessarily many of us. There's 3.5 FTE across those functions. We do often engage with councils, particularly council staff, who want to understand what are other councils doing, what does best practice look like, who should I talk to about X, Y, and Z. And through the engagement that we have at sector and zone meetings and the conversations that we have with staff and elected members, we're able to kind of connect to best practice or share some of that collective memory. We also have some experience ourselves. I, for instance, was very privileged to be a founding member of the Tupuna Maunga Authority in Auckland, and so that was co-management, not co-governance, but bring some of that experience and have those connections. And we've got the wonderful Dr. Mike Reid, who's been at LGNZ for 28 years, and we call him the agony aunt because he often gets called by elected members saying, "What do I need to know about this thing?" And I get aspects of it. So we do have some of those memory banks. We also increasingly have been working on areas of specific interest to pull together best practice and collective understanding. So, for example, we put out a localism guide for councils that was launched at the last conference that actually demonstrates some of the not just in the co-governance space, but the wider how you work with communities. I think we profiled some of the good work you do in Waikato Regional Council. We profiled a number of others, resources like that, resources such as the work that we do in funding and finance, where we can point to councils who have done the hard work in terms of using new tools or using existing tools in different ways. Those sorts of resources are open to members, and we're always really, really keen to understand what the next tool should look like, or how we can get some of that stuff better out, and how we can maximize those opportunities. So it's an open conversation, but it's that's one of the ways that we do that.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Simon and Susan. So I'm coming back to something you mentioned earlier in relation to fresh water. It's rather disturbing for me as a former RMA commissioner that every election that we have, or change of government in particular, in the RMA space, and particularly fresh water, we get bounced around left, right and centre. So what, as an example of what you're doing, and therefore, commenting on what we're paying for, what is LGNZ doing about bringing the parties together to get a more robust position going forward? Because as I see it at the moment, the only thing that's hurting with this political football is the environment. So long term, without certainty, and every change of government moving left or right, wherever. So what value do we as a regional council get from LGNZ in trying to bring the parties together? And they're always going to play around the edges, but that main thrust forward, to me, that's one of the most significant pieces of work that LGNZ should be doing, because it's really is hurting the environment. So can you tell me what you're doing to bring them closer together and stop this nonsense of political football? Thank you.
Absolutely. So totally agree. I mean, it is a significant challenge that actually councils have never fully landed freshwater plans before the NPSFM changes again. So understand that, and you're right. The people that lose out are not just it's not just the environment, but it's also your ratepayers and key sectors that go through that. Couple of things to say. We certainly do understand that challenge, and that's where we tackle it in a number of ways. The first is to try to get the information there. And so that's why things like actually identifying how much it costs has been particularly useful to be able to front foot those conversations. We get the right people in the room at the right time. And so having Minister Bishop, having the Secretary for the Environment at regional sector meetings, particularly where Chair Story and others can actually front foot those conversations. They've got the information in front of them. We're meeting with people at the right time. Our regular meetings with the Minister for resource management reform, where we're raising those issues and the ministers that are responsible for the wider MPS package. We also work with opposition to identify these challenges. And so we have regular meetings with key opposition parties, but also the minority coalition partners. So not just ministers, but we're quite mindful on the next. Our key focus in this space is really the wider RM reform, because we've seen the cost and complexity of that flapping in the wind. And certainly, without telling too many tales out of school, there was a robust conversation with the Secretary for the Environment about how they're getting political consensus across those political parties. Certainly, the conversations we've had with Minister Bishop have been backed up with Minister Bishop having direct conversations with Labour and the Greens around what can they agree on. There's some lines in the sand that make that quite challenging, but certainly we're having those conversations in the background. Can't say that we can get a 100% political consensus, but what we've tried to do in submissions and engagement and all of those sorts of things is to identify, well, what are the things you can agree on? You don't have to change the whole system in order to do that. An example which was frustrating was at the first, I think, meeting of Minister Bishop that we got for the regional sector after the election. I think it was our first meeting. He basically said, we repealed the Spatial Planning Act. We quite liked it, but we said we'd repeal it, so we did. Now, you've been, I think, world leading, at least nationally leading in the work that you do with spatial planning. But actually, part of the challenge is that doesn't clip into statutory plans. So when you get a district plan, you then have to have the whole conversation again, and you've got to reconcile all of those sorts of things. So we're very mindful on trying to bring that conversation. I think also the other thing that we're doing to that point is building a coalition of the willing. So we regularly have a lot of conversations with our counterparts in, be it Federated Farmers or Environmental Defence Society, or just to name some of the spectrum, but a number of players to say, how can we say the same things to the same people so that they hear it? So that's where we're heading. I guess the other piece of it is what we try to do is try to identify what the consensus amongst our membership is, because that's part of the challenge as well. It's all very well to say we want government not to change its mind, but if our members aren't collectively saying this is what we want you to do, they'll hear it from one regional council, they want one thing, another regional council wants a different thing, the TAs in those areas want very different things. That becomes very easy for the government to change its mind, and governments, when they change their stripes, do that as well. So we do quite a bit to try to work with members to understand what that piece is. Part of that, and I think it's actually agreeing with Neil's point, but I think it's the end point, the work that we do in the submissions. So pretty much every submission, unless we have ridiculous timeframes, and some of those are about to come, we will send out a draft to members. We get lots of feedback in and we incorporate it. We also, it's over to you to use. Part of that is testing, are we getting the stuff right? Are we building that consensus? But the stuff that we do beforehand, the engagement at all of local government sectors, sector meetings, zones, the conversations that we're having with your staff, all of those things feed into the messages. So it's not just we want you to agree, but here's what agreement looks like is the constructive thing that we get to. And one of the other things just to highlight, we've talked about the engagements that we have with elected ministers and ministers, and that's really important because they're the decision makers. The other bit that we spend a lot of time doing, and I joke about drinking a lot of coffee with public servants, but I do, is actually the bureaucracy doesn't change. And so the work that we can do in Wellington, spending time with the ministries who are giving the advice, to shape that advice, to understand what that would look like, to take your points and make sure they're fed in at the right place. It's very hard to change a minister's mind. Actually very useful and we get good cut through at shaping what that advice that influences their decision looks like. So spend a lot of time in thinking in that space. Obviously very keen to understand how we do that better and how we get those soundings, but that's again to the much earlier point, that's where we have lots of conversations with Te Uru Kahika, for instance, who bring that technical understanding of the work that you do, and others.
And just to add to that, the general point about the flip-flopping is super challenging in every area, infrastructure, water, you name it. And so at every opportunity in the public space, we talk about that stuff. So we talk about it with, as Simon said, with ministers, with the opposition, with other parties, and op-eds. I mean, Neil will be the first to say he's written a few op-eds around this. So Neil, I hand over to you, but like we have to keep the conversation live in the public arena, that this is just not helpful. All helps put that pressure towards getting some consistency and some coherence around the basics, that we actually don't want to see flip-flopping because it costs everyone money, it's inefficient, and it's incredibly difficult for ratepayers.
Yeah,
Neil?
look, just adding, we are trying to drag both sides of the house into some bipartisan stuff related to, I suppose, environment, spatial planning, and infrastructure. We've had some early signs of success in transport, with the talk about 10-year plans and having both sides of the house seem to be reasonably comfortable as long as they're left with enough. Basically our proposal has been that they develop 80 to 85% of the core funding is agreed, and then based on the political shades of the government of the day, they can move around the margins. But it is a challenge because they're all gearing up at the moment. But you can be assured that from my perspective, the conversations we're having, I've always talked to both sides of the house with the view that all of us that are elected are only one election away from either employment or unemployment in terms of that stuff. But it is a challenging situation now because it's become, we are becoming more polarized as a nation, and the policies we've seen more value destruction in the last couple of years, just due to significant differences in policy. But we're trying to be that moderate voice in the middle, and I realise that for some members, where they've got strong political allegiances, that they will be disappointed. But as someone said earlier, it is a broad organisation. It reflects people on all sides of the political spectrum. But I kind of live in the middle, trying to call for what is generally pretty much common sense.
Thank you.
All right, I've got Councillor Dunbar-Smith and then Councillor Clarkson.
Yes, Susan, just two questions for you and one for Neil. As Councillor Ma pointed out, you've got a $250,000 deficit this year. In terms of income, you've got 4 million coming in from subscriptions, 1.2 coming in from annual conference. Can you explain to me what the 1.5 is from the Equip Limited Partnership income, and then in addition, the DIA funding reform?
Oh, the DIA funding reform, that was an arrangement we made to support the government, to support local government after the start of the water services delivery, the last round of water service delivery. That was to support members. Mostly it was spent with technical advice. That is complete, that's finished. There was the last tranche of that. So that's what that was. The details of that are all on our website. There's nothing, sinister about that. So that's what that was.
Just on that, it was obviously highly political and did cause some splits in local government. Do you have any thoughts or regrets on that issue?
We learnt a lot. I think is what I'd say about that. And I have said that publicly and on the record. I think the whole of National Council learnt a lot in terms of, the early stages of that. And, one of the things that we learnt was that you have to double check your mandate with your members all the time. National Council can't assume a mandate just by virtue of the fact that they have been elected to National Council, and it is we now have a significance and engagement policy, which at a certain threshold we will take things back to our members. And we've got a couple of issues at the moment that are really interesting in terms of how we deal with, for example, what's coming down the pipeline around rates capping, and we would go to members on what position we will take on that. So that is one of the learnings that we have had from that. So that's important. The Equip wind down. So Equip used to be a separate entity within LGNZ in terms of it did consultancy work, and we have now integrated that into LGNZ. So it did a bit of consultancy work on appointing CEs. It held the roading efficiency group contract and a couple of other things. So that's now just moving into LGNZ. So that's much more streamlined. We don't have the costs of looking after another entity, and that's what the adjustment there is about.
Second point is, you've just talked as significance policy.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify? So you guys write and help write codes of conduct for councils, but did I understand correctly that LGNZ itself at the governance level doesn't have a code of conduct?
I think that's really, the National Council members have a internal charter that they work to around the types of issues that relate to conduct, but we don't have a formal internal policy around our conduct. I think it's a really interesting bit of feedback, and it is something that we can look at when we go back into the office, and we can talk to National Council about whether or not there's any value in doing that. We have an informal process that we deal with. We will deal with the issues as they arise, but that's something to think about. On a more general sense, what we don't write codes of conduct for.
Well, you help.
We have a template.
Yeah.
We have a template, and we're actually really interested in where a code of conduct sits in a broader spectrum of dispute resolution. We see our role very much to help councils help themselves. So we do an awful lot of work in that informal conflict resolution space. A couple of our team get calls regularly from councils in trouble because they are worried about a relationship with a peer, with their chief executive, or vice versa. So we often deal with those issues, and that can go right through from a intervention to, like a bit of advice or support through facilitation or mediation. It doesn't move into actually making any kind of determination, but we're looking quite closely at formalizing that resolution service so that everyone knows that this is available to councils, the independent resolution service that triages what's coming in the door to preempt matters getting to the code of conduct stage, which is massively expensive and often binary. So we're doing a lot of work in that space. But your point about if someone has an issue with Mayor Neil in terms of what he's done on behalf of LGNZ, how do we deal with that in a transparent way is a really good point. We start with informal interventions before we get to the critical code of conduct stage with us.
That's fine. Just on that, for Mayor Neil, you started off the conversation with a brief throwaway line about, I won't talk about unitaries, but my question was, given the discussions you were having with central government, can you see future directions for local government emerging? And is unitaries part of that?
Yeah, I don't think it. Look, I view that regardless of who the government is, there's a strategy within the bureaucracy to basically to consolidate local government and to strip away power and autonomy and basically leave us as a delivery arm of the bureaucracy. And if you look at, the various reforms that have come through and look, it's water now, and look, I'm certainly a big fan of regulation for the water assets, and for obvious reasons that we've systemically underinvested, but I am not a big fan of their model that basically would just see us as like branch officers delivering central government policy without question. But that to me is the undercurrent that I've seen. I've been in this role for 8.5 years. I've heard some throwaway comments from pretty senior people in the government that that direction of travel towards it. But whether that they are just that throwaway comments, or whether they there's real desire to drive that policy. I haven't seen evidence of a real desire, and I think that they know that they'll burn political capital on either side if they start trying to merge us or jam us together. And I mean, I think I can reflect that the approach that we've taken in Taranaki is we're actually all working together. The three TLAs and the regional council have got good relationships. We're doing work on shared services. We generally meet with our political visitors as a team, and we're trying to drive efficiencies. And our view is we'd rather do it ourselves than have it imposed upon us. But one of the reasons that I'm a big fan of LGNZ is that I actually fundamentally believe that we can do things better locally and more efficiently, and reflect, that whole subsidiarity that when you run decisions and processes closest to the people that you're working for, they are better. And I remember when David Seymour said that we were rubbish or something, and I just said, well, pound for pound, we'll go up against you, because I'd love to see what the overhead allocation of Wellington is versus ours.
Thank you.
Councillor Clarkson.
Oh, yeah. So first, I just wanted to thank Neil and Simon and Susan for coming.
Bring the mic over.
Yeah, I'll
There
turn
you
it
go.
around. Yeah, look, thanks Simon and Susan and Neil for fronting up today. And already it's apparent we've had a very refreshing honesty and analysis of what's sitting in front of us. I actually agree with Neil in terms of this being a no-brainer that we retain our membership of Local Government New Zealand, because fundamentally I cannot even conceive of an approach where we would not operate in some form of collective to get our views and our I guess our outcomes in front of central government in a collective way. I just can't see how we could be effective without a collective like this. And to be honest, local government and central government are both imperfect systems. They're imperfect systems. And we also need to guard against the fact that often ideas that prevail in central government are not the best for our region. Despite catch cries of words like localism from central government, when you dig around and find out what they are trying to achieve in many places, it is the opposite of localism. And we've just heard an example given to us by Neil about where, and I've heard some of those comments in Wellington myself, about where they actually see us sitting in the system. We are the people who are closest to where the problems are, and we are the people who can provide the best advice on how legislation, how regulation, how you name it, will proceed and work at a regional scale and a local scale. So I'm all for collectives, and this collective is one which is imperfect, but of course it's also our responsibility to be participants, active participants, and to make use of the services that are being provided in an effective way. So when you hear commentary, like some of the commentary I've heard around this table previously, from people who don't even turn up to the Zone 2 meetings, for example, so they don't really know what's going on in a Zone 2 meeting, and have not fully engaged with the opportunities presented by Local Government New Zealand, I'm sorry, I have to discount your view. So just the other day at Zone 2 meeting, we had a very informative discussion about the RMA reforms. And a speaker was brought in who was a specialist in relation to RMA reforms, Mark Davey from Hamilton City Council, who's a planning guru, a nationally recognised planner. And he gave us some of his thoughts about where things were tracking. So that's the other aspect of this role. It's about intelligence gathering. How do we get to know what's really going on in Wellington? And it's not about individuals meeting ministers. While I accept that that can be a useful tool at times, what we're talking about here is how a collective can operate. And I would claim always that the collective will be more successful in getting the desired result than individual approaches. So just reflecting on the events that I've gone to in Local Government New Zealand, I still think that at the Local Government New Zealand conference, the session on electoral reform that was being led by Nick Smith was a standout. Recently, I was at a meeting, a local government meeting, where aspects of harassment of candidates, bullying and misogyny were discussed in great detail, and very practical results from a program that had been worked on by a collective were being distributed for the use of people who are going to confront this problem in the upcoming election. So these are all important and great products that I've seen coming out of the system. And yes, it's not perfect, but there is actually no better model than a collective model. I also heard some comments just before about Te Uru Kahika. And I'd just like to remind people of the value of Te Uru Kahika as well, because this is a way where we can achieve coherence in the way we are developing and applying policy across the country. So we have, collectives on particular topics like, I'll have to say it, biodiversity is one, and resource use and water quality and all of those things where Te Uru Kahika provides an umbrella where people are coming together and working in a collective way. And again, this can only be the best way to do things in a collective. So they're assisting, I think, with coherent approaches to things like consenting, shared services, all of these things which are the precursors for perhaps one day talking about amalgamations or whatever they might be. But this is the body which provides, I guess, the backbone, if you like, that is facilitating and bringing local government together as a whole and leading towards greater focus on outcome and greater efficiency in the way we use our ratepayers' money. So I just had to say that. I think I'm extremely pleased that we got the visit today, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys in the foreseeable future. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for that, Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Nicol, online.
Oh, and sorry, I have to go
Sure.
a bit late,
Yes.
but all the best, and yeah, good luck with
Thank
your
you.
decision-making processes. Thanks. For the
Thank you, Mayor
opportunity to
Neil.
speak.
I know you stuck around longer than you said, so thank you for your time today.
Great. Have a good day, everyone.
Jennifer.
Oh, thank you, and sorry I can't be there today. Thank you to those who've come in, including Neil. I agree with most of what Bruce has said, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. I have certainly made the most of LGNZ membership, being part of the Young Elected Members Network and going to a few conferences and Zone 2 meetings and so forth. I appreciate the increased visits over the past couple of years, and especially those ones that are gathering our feedback on ways that LGNZ can improve, because the nature, as we've talked about, is it's a broad church, and yeah, I've certainly made sure to go to those so that we can keep feeding in. I'm glad we covered off the central government, local government relationship. It is the topic that concerns me most. It is the systemic issue that just seems to lead to so many conversations, and I think it's holding this country back very much, that central government and local government aren't aligned enough. So I'm just going to take the opportunity to say one more thing around, I'd love if LGNZ could advocate more on having local MPs meet with their local councils and build that personal relationship with the elected members, elected in a similar system, just like themselves, to work together for their area and know their area. Because it's just a bit surprising when I talk to MPs how little they understand this sector, as we call it. But it is really the other tier of government. And in that way, I see it as above the other sectors that they meet with, because if we were able to align, it would be absolutely transformational for this country. I think, having seen now over the past 5.5 years how much money can get wasted, left and right, central and local, with that not being aligned. So if you could advocate a bit more for the relationship of local MPs meeting with ourselves and local councils, that would be awesome, whatever that looks like. But thank you so much again for coming.
Just make a point. We totally agree with that point around local MPs. And from time to time, when we deliver our toolkits, we actually include some messages that you can individually or collectively use with your local MP. But certainly, so we would advocate both ways. We'll advocate to you that you have really good relationships with your MPs, get to know them, invite them in, and we will definitely do the same. We do, and we will continue to, and we've heard that plea to actually, make sure that they pay attention to you and come to your councils, and so it works both ways. So, yeah, really good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, and thanks again for today.
Thank you.
And just, and I'm not saying this was necessarily had the huge impact that we were hoping it would, but an example of where we did that. So after the change of government, the biggest caucus of new people was the national caucus, and so we met early on with them as part of our regular engagement, specifically to brief them on the work that we were doing on localism. As part of that, we talked about the role of local government and some of the great things that they were doing. But we also undertook and made the offer to them to connect them to their local councils to that point. It's certainly something that we're keen to understand other ways that we can be doing that, but we certainly did that work to, there were a lot of new electorate MPs, and so we did that connecting. As part of that, we had Charlotte Littlewood, who was the chair of Taranaki Regional Council, at that point talking about what regional councils did and the importance of building that relationship. So definitely keen on hearing other ways you'd like us to do that and other ways it could be more effective.
Okay,
I think on that, it's also, like this is an opportunity, in October, there are elections. So there's going to be a new cohort of you. So it's a really good opportunity for you all to be thinking about that and for us to be pushing that with central government.
Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Pippa. When we had our meeting in here with Sam back in, I think it might have been February, was it? February? Did he ever respond back to any of our questions that we brought up on that day? Because there were some concerning questions that we were aggravating for, that we LGNZ and others should definitely seriously look at the cost of infrastructure and depreciation and all these, which are still. But was there ever any response back from him of the advocacy of what they were, how he was going to help us in those areas?
I'd have to go check. Simon, you were
there,
online, weren't you? Or was it Susan was online? Somebody was online.
You were there, I'm pretty sure. Simon was there, sorry.
I was online for part of it. I certainly remember we had a conversation around special purpose vehicles and things. In terms of the specific question around infrastructure, I don't remember if there was a follow-up to that. So I'm happy to.
Well, we're happy to look. if there wasn't a follow-up and you're expecting a follow-up, we would obviously like to put that, work out what that was. Sometimes what we do from these meetings, because this is another way we get feedback, it's really important actually around the council tables, is take it back and feed it into our work. And sometimes there's an expectation we follow up and sometimes there isn't. So I'm not sure what happened there, but if we've got any way of looking back at what that was, we would certainly come back to you on those points.
Well, just infrastructure, especially in flood protection, is a third of our business here. And for him not to come back and respond to Pamela about our concerns.
I can't guarantee, I can't confirm today whether or not
No,
he
no,
did.
but-
I'd have to go
okay,
back and
but
check.
We had
have.
we've got serious funding going forward, and it would have been, well, anyway, not saying he didn't respond, but that's for Chair of ICM. I'd definitely, if we stayed members, we need far more help with central government, how these assets and the depreciation of them are going to be funded in the future, because the model that we've got is very difficult for us to work around. Yet TAs must use the same model for their water assets for drinking water and wastewater. Yet they haven't been, by what I understand, they most probably haven't been using the same model as what we've had to use, because we can foresee our costs where they've allowed assets just to depreciate and not water rebuilding. We're rebuilding our assets as we're going. So where's been the failure with them, where we've had to model this into our system that we already know what our assets are going to cost us in 80 years' time?
Can I suggest that, and I don't want to throw Simon under the bus on this, but Simon, is that you or one of your team engage with councillor on this and actually understand the issue and then work through it with him? Yeah.
That sounds great. I'd be very keen.
Yeah.
And we'll just go back through our notes.
Have a
on
look
that,
through the
on
notes,
back
but
of
also it
of
sounds
the
like
visit. Yeah.
a live issue anyway, so it'll be really good to have that conversation around that. Yeah.
Councillor Dunbar Smith.
Just very briefly, thank you very much for coming today. I did read some media reports that you are actually moving on or standing down, and I thought we might want to address that here in process.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it will be 5 years in a couple of months, and I have absolutely loved this role. I have learnt so much through it. I am a total advocate and believer of local government and a believer in local government. One of the things that was absolutely critical to me when I arrived was the declining voter turnout. So I'm absolutely, although we haven't arrested that, I'm absolutely thrilled that we have managed to have Mayor Nick lead a really comprehensive program on that with Simon's, actually Simon has done the work, but Mayor Nick is a massive advocate and done a huge amount of work with his team around that. So I'm thrilled that at conference, the final recommendations are going to be released. I have built some incredible relationships in the sector. I really, really admire you and what you do and the challenges you face, often against really big odds, and you keep going and you keep being committed to your communities and doing the best for them. And I see that across the broad diversity of local government. Those that support LGNZ, those that don't, I know that everyone is really, really committed to their communities. So thank you for your engagement with me. I have an open mind about what next. 5 years seems like a really good time for organisations and CEs to work together, and the time for me just felt, with the election coming up, as a really good opportunity to have someone else step into the role. National Council has appointed Scott Necklin, who many of you will know, to be the interim chief executive, because they've made the decision, which is the right decision, that the new National Council needs to appoint the permanent CE. So that's what's happening. So Scott's an interim CE till early next year. The new National Council will go through the recruitment process. This National Council will probably appoint the recruiter and get as far as that. Yeah, so that's work in progress. But thank you.
Thank you for that. And councillors, I appreciate your engagement on this session today. I mean, we've heard a number of comments. Sorry, Susan, or sorry, Jennifer, I was just gonna try and wrap this up. Did you have another question that you?
Yeah, no, keen for you to wrap it up. Just it occurred to me from Robbie's question that something I might have taken for granted, but I'm keen for Susan to clarify, and all the best for the future, Susan, is, you know, see, when I was trying to do some collaborative climate work and I'd gotten to know through engaging one of your previous staff members, Grace Hall, and how helpful she was. And it just occurred to me that maybe it's not universally recognised that we can just email one of your team and have something worked out with them. It doesn't have to formally go through one of these sessions or even Pamela. Did you just want to say something about how you'd like to be engaged with?
I absolutely. Look, my email box is open for the next 3 months, but Simon is, you know, constant. Any one of us will, any one of the leadership team, any one of our policy people, any one of our admin support will take any query from any of you, a direct query or request, and feed it to the right person in the organisation and get back to you. And if that doesn't happen, then please don't just think, LGNZ isn't responding, because we will 98% of the time, but every now and then something slips through the gaps. If we don't, please come back to us and say, hey, I haven't got a response to that. It's really important that you do that. And yeah, we are open doors, and we do a lot of that. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
that.
for
No,
that.
that's been my experience as well. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that, so things don't build up and then burst out. They can just be dealt with. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Nichols. So I won't reiterate things that too much. I'm going to reserve some reiteration, but just, I suppose, wanted to endorse some of the commentary from Mayor Neal around the value of the transport forum. We saw some real traction and reversal of positions around the emergency, I'm going to get the term wrong, but it was emergency funding ratios that come through for local roading reinstatement after cyclones and the like. And so I think that that's a very specific illustration of where engagement through LGNZ forums, be they the transport forum or RSG, you do see positive outcomes. You see the information that we as local government shares through this channel having an impact on the policy settings that come out. And the point about that it is one thing engaging with ministers, but we cannot underestimate the value of engaging with ministerial officials and ensuring that they understand the specific nature in our localities and how that needs to be considered in the shaping of national policy. And that's certainly something that I see positively reflected through the LGNZ connections. Your support in the Before the Deluge initiative, securing that funding, that has been significant for this region. And I know that you continue to support us as we go into trying to secure Tranche 2. So I just want to acknowledge that. I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that I certainly value is the counselor networks that LGNZ is able to help establish. As you well know, the Waikato region is the most complex when it comes to local government. So the opportunities that LGNZ events allow for all of us across the Waikato region to be in one room, whether that is at the LGNZ conference or at Zone 2 or at the all of local government events that you have, where in one room, I or any counselors, for instance, Councillor Clarkson, who was at the last all of local government, in one day, you can get around to every mayor plus plus their chief executives and any other counselors that they might bring to them. The efficiency of that in this particular region is not to be underestimated. And when you look at that in terms of Zone 2, where it's not just the Waikato region coming together, it is Bay of Plenty as well. And this region knows full well that those connections interregionally are as important to this region's success. And so Zone 2 offers a fantastic opportunity to bring those regions together so that we can have joined up conversations and see where there is synergy in us working together. I suppose that the last thing I would touch on is the value of collective bodies, right? That you touched on, Councillor Clarkson. You know, LGNZ is very similar to, I was involved many years ago in the setting up of the Community Energy Network, which was bringing energy efficiency groups together so that they could collectively advocate at a national level. Same thing with Enviro Hubs, Aotearoa. Same thing, where you bring smaller organizations together to form a collective voice, and that is how we are much more effective at shaping national policy and ensuring that central government understands the issues at the community level. So I certainly see the value of our membership in LGNZ and appreciate your willingness to come here today, sit down with us, talk through some of the issues we might have, and be able to reflect on the feedback that you have gotten collectively from councillors today. And I'm so pleased, Councillor Dunbar-Smith, that you did acknowledge Susan and your commitment to serving local government New Zealand over the last 5 years. It has been a pleasure to work with you. And also, just before we close, thank you very much for the letter to Minister Reti to close off that remit that this council put to LGNZ. I believe it got unanimous support. It got unanimous support around this table when we put it forward to around ensuring that census is done in a timely manner to inform our representation reviews. So thank you for following through on that remit and continuing to advocate on these matters that are of significant importance to us. Now, councillors, this is a workshop. Obviously, we are not making decisions, but I do want to do a straw poll. Based on the conversation we have had, I want to understand where our councillors are sitting right now in terms of our membership with LGNZ. So supporting, sorry? Well, this is a public workshop, so I mean, I can ask them to leave the room, but it is still a recorded thing. So if you feel more comfortable doing a straw poll without them in the room. Okay. So just wanted to get an indication. So those who support continued membership in LGNZ, if I could get you to raise your hands. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the room. Just want to check online. I've got Councillor Nicol online and Councillor Kneebone. Can't tell if Councillor Kneebone.
Yeah, I sent you a message.
Great.
Yeah.
Great, and support from Councillor Kneebone. Thank you very much, councillors. I appreciate your engagement and direction, because if staff don't have that from us, then it's difficult to make progress. So with that, if there's nothing else, then we will close this workshop. Again, thank you, Susan. Thank you, Simon. Do pass on our thanks to Mayor Neil as well. Kia ora, everyone.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
What
Yes?
was the count, please? Because I couldn't tell online.
You noted that? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in favor. And then there were 2 abstentions.
Right. So 7 included us online, did it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.